Remember the 5th of November.
The gunpowder treason and plot. I know of no reason why the gunpowder treason should ever be forgot.
Wow.
Wow.
I don't know it at all, so I have forgotten. I have not remembered to remember. So today on...
So that's a good reason why the gunpowder treason should be forgotten. You didn't know about it, really. Can you forget something if you didn't know it?
No.
Oh, okay.
Not technically.
Well, then you're
good.
fine. You're
All
fine.
right.
You're good.
But after today, I will remember it. So,
After today, I will quiz. There you go.
Today we are, this is This Week in History. Each week we pick a day from history and talk about it and why it's important. And this week we are discussing the Gunpowder Plot, which happened on the 5th of November, which some folks in last week were so kind of chime right in and remind us that that's V for Vendetta.
Yep.
And all the stuff we were just doing.
Yeah.
So we're going to learn about that today. Feel free to throw in comments to correct us and let us know. Do we have anything from last week? Usually just people.
Last week we're getting better at knowing our stuff.
We don't get things wrong.
Nah.
But we do like participation.
Yes,
so
we love that. We love when people chime in. We had lots of people chiming in, people making fun of different kings. Last week, I think somebody was yelling about Dimension. I don't remember which king I mentioned last. I don't even remember what we did last week.
Westphalia. Westphalia.
So I think.
I remember I wrote down Musketeers had big hats.
Yes, they had big hats.
And there's something called Dutch King pastry.
That's right. So, there was a actually. The Dutch have a king.
Oh.
I think it's more of a formal title, but somebody said that the Dutch actually have a king.
All right.
I have to verify that.
Not just a pastry.
But I'm going to trust the people. But that was a actually, is that the Dutch do, in fact, have royalty.
Well, thank you, then, for whomever corrected
They went through all that trouble to fight against an oppressive monarchy, and then, love a king. Which we'll explore later, I'm sure.
Sure. But not today. Today, I don't even know what country this place takes place in. This is England.
Merry old England.
All right. So Will has 1 hour to explain to me the Gunpowder Plot.
Gunpowder Plot. So that rhyme that I just said is a nursery rhyme that's been passed down for years. I don't know when it started. Probably back right after this.
Which was when, by the way?
1605.
So
well over 400 years ago now. And there was a very famous movie, and there was a book, a graphic novel written called V for Vendetta that features a guy who wears a mask, and then the wide-brimmed, we'll call it like a pilgrim hat. That's V, and the mask style is called the Guy Fawkes mask. Now, Guy Fawkes was he's been painted as a revolutionary, as a patriot, but really what he was a religious extremist. And there's a reason why he was a religious extremist. So it's not like you don't become at least back then, you didn't become an extremist in a vacuum. Nowadays we have, people are extremists sometimes. You're like, but why? Is it?
I don't know. I think it's still from other people.
And that's the thing is it typically comes from an outside source, right? Maybe your parents, your circle of friends.
Yep.
So this is a combination of those things with Guy Fawkes. But Guy Fawkes, while he's the most famous of them, is not actually the leader of the organization. The leader of the organization was Robert Catesby. Robert Catesby was born in 1572, and he did not live much past the 5th of November.
Spoilers.
1605, and we'll find out exactly why. So the Gunpowder Plot was this idea by Catesby to blow up Parliament. The whole building.
Blow it up.
Had to go bye-bye. Now, this is not today's Parliament, okay? Today's Parliament building is Big Ben, giant building.
Yeah.
Very, very big. The amount of explosives you would need to blow that up, I don't know.
A lot.
Probably a lot. Probably a great amount.
Fair amount.
Like in the movie V for Vendetta. You used a whole train of boom booms.
Yeah, I saw a movie years ago and I barely remember it. But it was more modern day.
Yeah, it's more modern day. And that's what they do. He takes the idea of it. He wants to recreate what Guy Fawkes did, which was... But actually, it's this whole thing.
It's all making sense.
It's all making sense. Well, and the principle of the film and the reason why people liked it so much is it's against fascism. You've got this government they hate Muslims, they hate gay people, they hate foreigners, they hate anybody who's not their version of a white Christian person, and they've got very kind of Hitlerian stuff. And also when it was written, it was against Margaret Thatcher, who was like, kind of seen as like the Iron Woman, and she was kind of a tyrant.
Hitlerian, by the way, too close to the word hilarious.
That's like when Hitler would trip and fall.
Yeah.
That was hilarious. Hilarious. Every German failure is hilarious. But anytime it's bad, it's hilarious.
Right.
It's not good.
Yeah.
So at this time, we have to kind of figure out, why did these guys want to blow up Parliament?
Yeah, you don't just do that.
You don't just wake up and... unless you're completely insane.
Now, so just for context here, at this point, England has their monarchy, but also
they also have a parliament.
The parliament?
Correct.
Okay.
So they have what's called a constitutional monarchy, which they still technically have, although their royalty don't have any say in anything.
Their Majesty the Queen.
She just owns a huge amount of land.
Yes.
It's like...
And corgis.
And calling in the rent and the corgis. Oh, by the way, thanks again to Crystal Coffee. Still not our sponsor, but...
Any day now.
For those of you not from the area, this is in Green Bay. That's where we are, Wisconsin.
And this is a free promotion for their coffee.
Go there, it's good. There are many great coffee places, but this is the one that's open and on the way.
You said that like the gun thing they do in the Marines. There are many coffee places, but this one is mine.
This one is mine. Coffee.
Completely off track.
Yeah. Well, coffee's important. It's how it fuels history. It's the lubricant on the gears.
I feel we'll discuss coffee at some point.
I think we should. So this can all be blamed kind of on one guy.
Ooh.
That we talked about a little bit last week, I think, and we've talked about before. Henry VIII.
Henry VIII. I am.
Now, not to be coarse, but universally, deservedly known as a dick.
He's the one with the wives who he didn't care for at the end.
Not at all. He actually had one of his wives killed, and her brother and her father, under trumped-up charges of incest.
Ooh.
That's how Anne Boleyn died.
Oh.
It wasn't that she just cheated on him. That's bad enough when you're king. But he said she was in a three-way relationship with her father and her brother. It was a total fabrication, but it was a way that he could kill them off and also seize their land.
Wow.
Yeah, he was a monster. But his being a monster created the Church of England. The Anglican Church, a church known for right angles and isosceles triangles and it's angles, right?
Yeah.
Right? All their churches are angles.
I feel like he's lying to me, but I don't.
I don't know anything about. No. So it's the Church of England. So yes. What had happened was Henry VIII wanted to have a divorce.
Yes.
The Pope said no. He got sick of that and being told no because he kept not having kids, not having sons. So of course that's the women's fault, right? That's not his fault.
Well, he's not going to kill himself.
And he can't kill himself. So he just blames all the women why he can't have a male heir. It's always their fault. It has nothing to do with him. Although modern day wise genetics, we can kind of go, or just common sense.
Sure.
If you're the common link between all these people.
Regardless, it's not a fault thing.
And you haven't had a kid.
It's more of a coin flip, isn't it?
Yeah, it is kind of. It's kind of a random thing.
Yeah.
But he had 2 kids with all of these people.
Both girls, I assume.
Both girls. And one of them was Queen Elizabeth. And then her sister Mary. And
both good ships.
Good ships, yes. I think he did have some sons, but they didn't live.
Oh, okay.
None of them lived long. So he had a bunch of kids, but there's a lot of reasons why you're not having sons.
Yeah.
Or maybe if he'd been completely impotent, which happened frequently, but he just blamed the women. And if they weren't having enough kids, he got rid of them. His first marriage was a political marriage.
Okay.
She was a powerful woman from Spain. Her father was a king. And then that means her brother became a king. So she's an important person.
Yeah.
And he couldn't just throw her out.
Yeah.
That would look really bad. The Spanish would get mad. Which they did.
Yes.
Because he shamed her. So he's just moving through women and just generally a monster.
So he was told from the first one they couldn't divorce?
No, divorce no good.
All right, so that from then on he just said
did what he
different
wanted.
solutions?
He just did what he wanted. So he started to work to get the marriages annulled by his own bishops. And then the Pope was like, you can't do that. He said, well, forget you. This is my island. Yeah. I'm the king. I make my own damn rules. So he created the Act of Supremacy in 1534,
Ooh.
which is when he said, I am not just the king of England, I'm the king of the church in England. And nobody outside of England can tell me what to do.
Is that when the Church of England became the Church of England?
That's roughly when it's considered, because it was a series of reforms. It wasn't so much a, bam, Church of England today.
Yeah.
But that's considered like the turning
That's
point.
for sure a declaration of it.
I am in charge.
Yeah.
The Pope immediately excommunicated. It was like, you can't do
That's
that.
not
I'm the Pope. And bear in mind, at the time, there is just one Christian church.
Yeah.
That's it. There's no, I mean, there are little subdivisions.
Sort of,
There's like the Cathars who all died. There were little groups of them across Europe that all got murdered, largely by the church. You know, because that was a big part of Jesus' teachings, I think, is people don't do exactly what you say, you just kill them.
Yeah, we call it converting.
I think that's right. Right? That's the thing.
Try to convert, and you ask nice the first time.
Yep. And then you walk in with soldiers and stabbies the next time.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Yep.
He had an illegitimate son. Yep, that's what I was gonna say. He died young.
Oh,
Katie is just feeding us information. Thank you, Katie. We're gonna look at all of this. You're super helpful, as always. So Henry VIII, not a good guy. He's decided, I don't have to listen to the church anymore. I'm doing what I want. After he dies, his daughter Mary eventually winds up running things, and then she gets ousted by her sister Elizabeth.
Oh.
The Virgin Queen.
Ousted.
She's removed.
Yeah, I know.
Power. There was a whole.
I understood the word ousted. I just didn't know what.
There's a whole thing. I think I might be, because there are two Marys. Yeah. And it's very confusing, because one is Mary, Queen of Scots, and they tried to make her take over for Elizabeth. And they had a fight, and she got. And I think either her sister got sick and died, or there was a rivalry there regardless.
Okay.
But young Elizabeth becomes queen. This is not the part of the history that I am supposed to be super right on. Okay?
True.
This is the
setup.
This is the setup. This is the setup. I will study more.
The amuse-bouche, as they say.
Yes. It's in a bush of amusement. That's like the burning bush.
His French is not very good.
No. We know that. My French is, that was French. Which?
Make a note of amuse-bouche.
Amuse-bouche. Amusing bush. It's a cognate.
Keep talking.
So Elizabeth takes over, and she, at first, kind of tempers this, instead of saying, because he sets up a title, and it's like, Supreme Ruler of the Church in England. And then Mary had taken over, and she was like, no, I'm not even going to use that. Yeah. I am, but I'm in charge, but I'm getting rid of that title. And then Elizabeth takes over, and she's like, Supreme Governor. We'll just.
Oh, that's nicer.
She's like the governess, A governess was like a nanny, So I'm the Supreme Governor. I'm supposed to oversee it. And she starts to crack down hard on Catholics after a while because of outside interference. Oh. So Henry really made the Spanish angry. Right, he shamed his wife Catherine, and that enraged the Spanish king. Henry had tried to invade France, and then he was kind of waving his finger and sword at everybody and threatening everyone. And he wanted to be like this conqueror king. Yeah, he never really accomplished anything. Like that. Foreign relations wise, he was kind of a hack.
Just a loudmouth, though, and a bully.
Yep, he was a loudmouth and a bully. He beat up women and did what he wanted, and he had them executed. And he had a lot of people killed.
But it makes that song less funny now.
Yep, yeah, really. He also did this really big deal, was seize all church land. All of it. Every square foot of church land he seized for the crown.
After he
became supreme leader. That was another big no-no. He just said, there's all these abbeys and all these churches, and they're bringing in revenue.
Yeah, it's mine now.
Mine. And he took it. Yeah. And he had this secretary, Cromwell, who was famous for being...
Oliver Cromwell?
Not Oliver.
Dang.
I think he was a descendant. I think because Oliver Cromwell shows up later, and it's all tied to this. Oh. This is all related.
Exciting.
Because Henry has started to set up this idea of a supreme monarch. Yeah. He's not just in charge of the land, the people, also the church. Yeah. And before, it was kind of a balancing act. You've had these great kings, like one of the greatest kings and the founder of Henry's family line, Henry, was this titan who just would ride. He was so energetic and powerful. He ruled the majority of France and all of England. He technically worked for the King of France, but the King of France was scared of him. And then his sons were Richard the Lionheart and John Lackland, because he lost half of their whole.
His name is John Lackland.
They called him John Lackland, John the Bastard. He was the bad guy in Robin Hood. He sucks.
That guy.
He's the worst guy. So this is Henry. He's this powerhouse, and Henry I. Henry VIII kind of wanted to emulate him. He wanted that, but even Henry I had the church temper him. He was accused of murder once, and he had to basically beat himself in public and walk to apologize to the church. So even the king, the greatest king of his time, had to be subservient.
Were there 7 Henrys between them, or that were kings, or just
not in order?
Okay.
Not in order.
Why put them in order?
Not in order. No. There were Edwards. There were a lot of Edwards. There's a lot of Henrys.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of Richards, but I think Henry is the most.
But not every number.
Like
not every number was a king, though, right?
Every number was a king.
Oh, okay.
Just for sometimes very short times.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was in passing.
Oh.
And I think actually, you might be right. Some might not. I think you have to have gotten the kingship.
I just haven't heard.
To be a full king.
I haven't heard of Henry III.
Oh, I have.
I haven't heard of.
But he was a shorter reigned king.
Okay.
It's not quite as important.
Once again, I digress.
We could go into all of these kings, but
the
reason I brought up the first Henry is to kind of pitch this. He's this powerhouse who actually was seen almost as powerful as an emperor. He was kind of like the English Charlemagne. Other countries would be like, I'm having a problem. Can you talk to him?
Yeah.
And Henry would go, oh, I'll be the peacemaker. I could crush you all, but I'll just be the peacemaker. And that gained him respect. But he still always tried to listen to the church.
Henry I.
Yeah. Henry VIII is like, not going to do that anymore. Done.
Nope.
Done with this 500 years of tradition nonsense. I am in charge.
I'm the king now.
I'm the king. Look at me. I'm the king now.
Pretty sure that's not how it went.
I think it is. Yeah. I don't know. And so Elizabeth takes it a step further because the Spanish start plotting to kill her.
Oh.
They eventually have a massive war with her. There's the Spanish Armada invasion of 1588, where they send this gigantic fleet, hundreds of ships, tens of thousands of soldiers in Spain. They're going to go invade England. She gets basically a bunch of fishing boats.
Oh, no.
And defends England. But she sends off her most famous captain of the time is Francis Drake, who's one of the few explorers who didn't just exterminate local populations. He was a pirate for England, and he would fight the Spanish, and that was his goal, was to fight the Spanish. And he was really good at it. He would loot their treasure houses in the New World. And then he got kind of stuck. So he had to run away. He couldn't go back across the Atlantic. So he just went the long way. Sailed all the way around the world. And he was the second ship to circumnavigate that we know of, European-wise.
Sure.
There may have been other ships that did it. That just nobody talked about.
Yeah.
It. Maybe China sent a ship and it made it around the world. Nobody talked about it.
We don't do Chinese history here.
No, not really.
We haven't. I mean, we will. Maybe
we could. We've done Japanese.
We're not against it.
We're not against it. It's fascinating. It just there's a lot of information.
Sure.
It's 5,000 years of history.
So
Francis Drake gets sent off. He starts beating up the Armada. The Armada eventually sails to England. They fail. They get frustrated that
against his fishing boats.
Against fishing boats, basically. She had some warships, but the Spanish had these galleons, 100-gun ships, giant floating wooden fortresses, and the English beat them.
It feels similar to the what's the World War II part where they get people out with just fishing boats.
Oh, Dunkirk.
Yeah, England's good
with their fishing boats.
They are plucky with their fishing boats.
They are plucky, and that was the thing. They had great tactics, and their sailors were excellent sailors. Whereas the Spanish weren't sailors; they were warriors
and lovers.
They were, and with the bull, and the cape and the bull, and every galleon had to have a bull ring.
That's probably why that's not effective for a boat.
Not so effective.
Yeah,
the bull just runs around, causes problems.
Why do we bring a bull on the boat?
I don't know. Why, this was a terrible idea. Well, we're going to unleash it in England. He will run rampant and kill all of the English bulls. Then we'll only have Spanish bulls. And that's a bunch of bull.
And that's why the plot failed.
And that's why it failed. Well, it was a combination of, and this has happened almost every time we talked about an English invasion, the weather. The weather protects England. Again, the Spanish Armada gets all thrown all over the place.
Oh.
They show up piecemeal, and the English are like, let's do it! And they crush them.
As much as they complain about the weather in England.
It saves their hide.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's rainy there, but the English Channel is just a nightmare, apparently. That's apparently just the worst thing. If you have a boat, don't go there.
And the English are used to it.
They're used to it. So they had these lighter, smaller ships that could just kind of circle the bigger ships, sink them, destroy.
Okay.
So the Spanish are frustrated with this, and they refuse to let these dirty Protestants, their words, not mine, their words are actually a lot worse.
I don't really have a feeling towards Protestants one way or another.
I have a feeling towards, whatever. I have a problem with, a king murdering his wife and all that.
Sure.
I mean, specific Protestants, maybe.
Right.
Much like specific Catholics or specific anybody's. Just, don't be a murdering jerk.
Sure.
So Elizabeth gets frustrated with this. She's convinced legitimately that the Spanish are plotting with all of the local Catholics to overthrow her. She starts finding plots. They try to replace her with her cousin, Mary Queen of Scots. So she starts executing people. Like all over the place, including her cousin. She has her cousin executed, which is a big deal.
Yeah, especially if you're a cousin.
Yeah, and people are like, kind of like your dad, murdering people.
Hey, boy, this tactic seems to be effective, but
he was really good at killing women too, and you're kind of killing a lot of women. And so
you have your father's eyes and his penchant for killing people.
Exactly.
Beautiful. Really.
What's with the bloody sword you carry?
Isn't nature beautiful?
It's so wonderful. So she starts killing priests just for being priests.
Oh, that seems like a line.
That's a line.
It's
not that but they're potential plotters. That's when she starts to think. Everything's a potential plotter.
Oh.
So she cracks down hard on these people. And it's, at first you're like, okay, yeah, well, all the people that were trying to kill her were Catholics. Yeah. So maybe you guys should stop. Happened. Yeah. But then she goes a step further and overcorrects. Rather than killing people or imprisoning people or exiling people that are directly responsible, she kills everybody that has, a little Catholic, a little C by the name.
Yeah.
She starts putting into effect that people can be Catholic, but they have to basically pay a yearly fine for the right to just exist.
Wow.
And they collect revenue from that.
Do they have a name for that?
Recusant. You were recused from public life, basically. You didn't go to church. But people knew you were a Catholic. Because otherwise everybody went to church. So why aren't you going to church? Oh, he's Jewish. Oh, that guy's not going to church, though. He's Catholic. And at the time, they actually were much more welcoming towards Jews than they were Catholics. The Jews have been treated like garbage throughout all of European history. Like, well, they're just Jewish. They don't know any better. But you're a dirty Catholic, and you knew better, and you're a traitor.
You hear that, Jews? The one time you weren't at the bottom.
Yep. And I'm pretty sure the local dude like, ha! How's it feel? Ha ha!
Kind of nice.
Although, like next week, they could get kicked out. So I'm sure they weren't very...
Sure.
I'm sure they are not running around going, look at this, I'm so smart. I could do whatever I want. They were largely like, everybody keep your head down, because if we say anything, this could blow back on us very quickly.
I'm trying to do
the dance?
Yeah, but I don't know which way to move. Get both my arms on the screen.
Know. I'm not Jewish.
Well, it's a matter of the screen, not the Jewishness.
Yeah. I just wasn't sure if you're doing it right.
I'm doing it wrong as well. All right.
Yeah. So this is a problem, right? There's bloodshed everywhere, and there's more plots of rebellion. And the Pope keeps saying, don't do it.
Strange how murdering a bunch of people doesn't make people like you.
No. And they're planning more rebellion. But at the time, there's only like a few thousand Catholics left in England.
We're running out of Catholics.
There's not a lot of them. And people are still like, gotta kill her. Gotta kill her. We gotta kill her. We're gonna kill the Queen. And the Pope's sitting back there going, the last time you guys tried to kill the Queen, she killed hundreds of people.
Remember that?
Don't do it.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, we're gonna kill the Queen. Well, fortunately for them, they don't have to ever try this again, because the Queen dies.
Hey, good on her.
The throne passes to her nephew, James.
Oh.
James is Scottish and
so
was raised by Catholics. His mama was Mary, Queen of Scots. So I think I don't know if he's technically a nephew or a cousin. I'm not sure how it works. I think that's actually a cousin. Whatever. Doesn't matter. So he's the next in line. He becomes king. People think, he's a Protestant, but he might have Catholic leanings, and he might actually convert. This could be a really good thing for all of us. Hooray, hooray, hooray.
Sorry, Elizabeth is dead, but hey.
And this is the same James who was king when we talked about the 30 Years' War. And
Yeah.
the Danes were like, hey, James, you're a Protestant. You want to help us out? And he's like, I'm good.
Oh, yeah.
He did not want to get involved in global warfare. He wanted to just kind of rule the country. This is a big deal. So he's becomes the King of Scotland and the King of England. He unifies the thrones. Pretty cool time.
Nice.
And it was without bloodshed. Normally that was
Wow. That's
throughout English history. If you wanted Scotland, you had to kill a bunch of people.
Yeah.
And he didn't. He just was like, well, I'm Scottish and I'm also
Well,
the
he's
English
from
king.
Scotland.
All right, we're good
Yeah,
to go.
Sure.
So he becomes James II of Scotland, James I of England, or vice versa. I'm trying to remember.
Yeah.
There's so many James, and there's so many. There's so many. So he's King James.
King James.
King James, and he takes a much less hardcore approach to all of this. He starts going, you know what? We're still going to do the policy about you can be Catholic and you have to pay a fee, but we'll postpone that for a year. Take a year off.
Nice.
We're just going to get things sorted out. And he tries to be more accepting. He stops killing priests.
It's nice when the bar is really low.
That's exactly. So he comes in like, I'm the greatest king ever by comparison to the Catholic. And the
Our
Catholics,
streets are full of potholes.
Yes.
Yeah, but I haven't killed a priest yet today.
Not a single priest. And they're
I've
like,
stopped doing that.
by comparison, that's pretty great.
It's pretty nice.
I wonder if we can think of a recent thing in history where that's been like,
Maybe.
well, it's still on fire, but it's less on fire.
Maybe.
There's no new fires. Like, I feel like if you were the guy after Hitler, you could be the worst leader ever, but you're like, but.
See?
Yeah,
who was after Hitler?
I don't
I'll
know.
look that up later.
I think there were two. Technically, you got East and West Germany.
Oh, sure.
And I don't think East Germany had an actual leader. I think it was Joseph Stalin. I don't think he was technically in charge of it.
Yeah, at
That
some
was
point,
behind the curtain.
Post-Nazi Hitler Germany, there had to be, like, someone
Eventually.
sweeping up.
Yeah, because for a while it was...
That had to be the hardest and easiest job at the same time.
For a while it was the UN was running everything on one
Yeah.
side, the Soviet Union running everything. Yeah,
that's way off
That's
topic.
it's hundreds more years in the future. So we've got James, and he comes in and he's like, well, I'm not going to kill a bunch of people, so that's step one. Step two, not going to go and get involved in a bunch of foreign wars.
And
That's a great start. Although his daughter he starts planning a good long family line.
yeah.
So he sends his daughter off. She marries the King of Denmark. So he's got connections there. Unfortunately for him, then the Kingdom of Denmark decides to get involved in the whole chaotic 30 Years' War. And he's like, oh my God, I just wanted to be a king. And unfortunately, this draws attention from some of the recusants and some extremist types who are like, I don't like this. In 1601, the Earl of Essex decides, I've had enough of this anti-Catholic nonsense, and he has a rebellion. And this is possibly the most embarrassing rebellion of all time.
Oh, boy.
Because it's basically, he fortifies his homestead.
Yep.
Gets a bunch of guys together, a bunch of gentlemen, and they demand to speak to the Queen of England. This is still back when the Queen's, before she's dead, but she's very old.
Yeah.
And he's like, we're going to speak to the Queen and we're going to seize power.
That's how a good rebellion starts.
They just walk in.
We'd like to talk to
They
you.
walk into the parliamentary complex, which is the old palace, and it's just like, they describe it as a warren of buildings. And for those who don't know, a warren is a rat's nest.
Oh.
It's just a series of stuff built on top of old stuff, piled next to other stuff. There are merchants selling stuff. There are lawyers with offices there.
Starbucks.
There's nobles. There's not a Starbucks. There's like a Green Bean, the
okay.
off-brand Starbucks.
Oh, shit.
It's a mess. It's just this mess. They can't even get a Dunkin' in there.
Oh, man.
That's how bad it is. And then they have, the nobles and hobnobbing around, and the royals are coming in and all this jazz. So they storm the complex.
They had jazz there?
They had
too?
jazz.
Wow.
Yep, on like mandolins.
Yeah. I'm gonna look for
They
some
only
jazz,
had one kind of drum. They didn't invent cymbals
some
yet.
jazz mandolin later.
And the best punctuation was you could always just wait for the shlink of a sword and a head falling on the ground, and that was the end of the song. Every time.
So Essex and the boys come rolling in.
They come rolling in and they're like, we're in charge here. And everyone is like, nope. No, you're not.
Yeah.
They get beat up in a fight.
Like in the street?
Like a brawl. It's not even like the guards are there. It's like a bunch of other stodgy, uptight, noble guys like, no! You don't come in here with your attitude, young man.
I picture a lot of slapping and rathers and
there's a lot of like drawing of sabers, but not a lot of actually pulling out of swords and stabbing anybody. And people just get the crap kicked out of them.
Perhaps a lot of perumps.
I didn't get a harumph out of that guy. Watch your ass. So they send him scurrying back to the Essex house.
Yes.
And the queen's like, call in the soldiers. I've had enough of this crap. This is nonsense and I'm not dealing with it. So they send the armed guard of the palace to this guy's house.
To Essex.
With his, his buddies.
So he came over there, left a flaming pile of dog poop on their porch.
Basically.
And she went, okay, send the cops.
Send the cops. They start to kind of resist and then they realize, oh, this is the army.
Oh. We done messed up.
So maybe a bunch of guys rattling our swords shouldn't. And this wasn't like a case of unarmed peasantry. These were nobles. These guys were trained. They know how to fight, but they overplayed their hand, you know. And so the queen sends the soldiers. The soldiers arrest everybody, and they execute Essex.
Oh,
because he's a straight up traitor.
Don't come for the queen.
Don't come for the queen
unless you plan to finish it.
Right, and that was pushed by like every member of parliament. Was like, kill that guy. That's treason. That was not even the queen
not cool, man.
Pushing hard. They were like, even if you made a good point, the way you went about it, you don't storm into the parliament, threaten everybody, start beating people up, and have a plan to like kill the queen. That's nonsense. Cut his head off.
Yikes. That's final.
That's final. They don't want to deal with traitors.
Decisive.
Now, that brings us to 4 years later. There's a new king. He's fairly temperate by comparison. He has not massacred people.
Who's this new fella?
This is James. This is James. So now we've got James. James is doing his best to be understanding and be patient, and kind of there might be a walking back of some of the old things. He's still a Protestant. He's not making any effort to become a Catholic, but he's not going around executing everybody. Right. He actually takes a fairly lenient approach when people are a problem. He says, rather than take their heads, I'd rather they take their heads and their body and go away from England. You
kind of said that like Groucho Marx. But rather than take the heads, I'll take the heads and
the
body out.
Just to make them go away. So he's a fan of exile as opposed to just murder.
Execution.
Yeah, exile, not execute. It's a whole, there's chanters. Exile, not execute.
Catchy.
Yeah, they've had problems getting chants in England. That's why the politics didn't work so well. The poor Catholics couldn't come up with a good chant. And you'd think,
they can chant,
all those years in church, you'd think they could come up with something. But it was in Latin and nobody knew what was going on.
Gregorian chant's just too slow.
Too slow. You can't get the point across, and it's in Latin, and the common person is just like, I don't speak Latin. I speak English. Speak the King's Latin, which is English. Because that was another thing with the Anglican churches. All the masses were in English. Traditionally, church was always done in Latin. So it was very popular. Like the Anglican church is very, very, very similar to the actual Catholic church. It's just,
I can understand what they're saying.
Suddenly understand all the stuff that's going on. So it wasn't like it was unpopular. That's why there weren't that many Catholics in the country. But because they started having extremists, they started cracking down on them. So, 4 years later, Catesby, the guy we mentioned earlier, Robert Catesby, Bobby, who's a noble. This isn't a peasant revolution. This is very important to understand. This is not a peasant revolution. This isn't like the oppressed masses rise up against the power hungry. This isn't the American Revolution where it was this will not stand. This was a few rich guys and then some poor people that they brought in rising up. Because the poor Catholics were like, could you guys stop? We just want to live and you're getting us all killed. Yeah. Every time you guys do this, and again, the Pope keeps saying, be patient. The more violence you do, the more they're going to crack down on you. Just like how, I mean, he's not going to say it, but it's just like how the Spanish did it to everybody else during their Inquisition. The more there was violence, the more justifies doing violence towards them. And this
Smart
is the case.
Pope.
This is why extremism is always bad. It does
Yeah.
not matter. Like, sometimes violence is necessary. Like, we look at our revolution. That was important because the English weren't going to stop
Yeah.
until they just ground us down. Or like the Dutch rebellion in Spain at the exact same time. The 80 Years' War that we talked about. That's going on right now, too, during this time period. The Dutch are still fighting day in and day out against the Spanish for their own independence. And it was because the Spanish were grinding them down and killing everybody that wasn't like them. The English, at least, had for a time just a system of, well, you just have to pay for the right to have to worship.
Right.
Which isn't right. You know, you could,
No,
I mean, you
but-
can look at that and say that's objectively not fair.
Right. But better than killing them.
Better than dead.
Yeah.
And the Jews, meanwhile, again, are sitting there going, yeah, you guys think this is bad. Literally every time
We got a
something,
thing to tell you.
yeah, something every time anything goes bad, people just find a reason to execute the Jews.
Yeah.
Throughout all of European history, anytime like there's a crusade, they find a Jewish settlement on the way. Like, oh, they're not Christians. Let's kill them. And the Jews are like,
It's so much fun to
could
be
you
Jewish in
not?
history.
Could you not? And that's probably something we could talk about because we've talked about that before. Is
Sure.
when was this ever? Why did this become popular to blame them for everything?
Yeah, that was odd.
It is very weird. It's almost like it was planned.
Oh.
Planned by the kings and such.
Sounds like Will knows more about this than I know.
I know a lot about
Okay,
this.
well, we'll talk about
We'll
that.
talk about that another time because it's not a singular event. It's many.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we've got the Pope saying, don't start doing violent stuff again. It's calming down.
We've tried it. Don't do it.
We saw what happened.
Yeah.
And that idiot from Essex, worst plan ever.
Yep.
Dumb. Don't do it. So this guy Catesby was friends with Essex.
Oh.
Unfortunately for him, everybody knew it. If you're a recusant, everyone knew who you were.
Oh.
Your neighbors knew you didn't go to church, so they knew you were probably a Catholic. This guy was a wealthy landowner who was there when they stormed Parliament. And he's like, I'm going to come up with a secret plot to get rid of the king. Because his plan is...
Did he say it out loud like that?
He did. To his friends.
Here's my secret plot, everyone.
My secret plot. I have a plot. It will involve gunpowder.
Oh.
And what we're going to do is we're going to blow up Parliament and kill the king and anybody else next to him and replace the king with his niece, who's Catholic.
Oh, okay.
Or his daughter, who's Catholic. And they're like, yeah, that sounds like a good plan.
That is a plan.
That is a plan.
It's a better plan than the Essex guy had.
Which was nothing, really.
Which was no
It's like,
plan.
I'm just going to walk in and yell at you.
Yeah.
Don't come in and yell at the crabby old queen. She's probably going to cut your head off. We've seen her do it.
Yeah.
So that's his plan. And he starts recruiting guys that he knows are tough. They're fighters. And the number one guy he finds is Guy Fawkes.
Yeah.
And he went to school with Fawkes. Or he didn't go to school. Fawkes went to school with some of the other guys in the conspiracy. But he knew Fawkes from similar circles. And Fawkes was this guy who was raised Protestant, but because that was what you did. But his uncle was a priest during the time of Elizabeth. And as we know, Elizabeth just started axing priests.
Bad time to be a priest.
His uncle was one of those killed. That starts pushing him towards extremism. He's like, that's what happens to Catholics. That's messed up. My uncle was a nice man. He
And so
didn't
what
do
the
anything.
Pope said, violence leads to more violence.
Exactly.
Listen to the Pope.
Yep. So she kills his uncle. He becomes a recusant Catholic. And then he decides he wants to be a soldier. So for 10 years, he goes and joins the Spanish army fighting the Dutch because he's going to kill him some dirty Protestants.
His words.
His words. He can't kill Protestants in England. That would just make him a murderer.
Right.
Next best thing, be a soldier. Because then it's not murder. That's how you justify it.
Wow.
It's not murder.
Yikes.
So he's, if not trained, experienced. His training at the time was point the gun that way, and if they come towards you, stab them.
All right.
There was a lot of...
That was extensive training.
It was more about marching in a column and then pointing in the right direction with a weapon and
Yeah.
then not running away when they do the same thing to you. But a guy who does this for 10 years, he's got some experience.
Sure. Another thing or two.
So Catesby recruits him. He's like, this is a hard dude. This is a tough guy. I will use him. Fawkes knows some other guys that are fighters, that are tough. The two big ones that stuck out to me were John and Christopher Wright.
Hmm.
This conspiracy winds up being a total whopping number of 13 people.
It's not much.
Not a lot.
But if you have gunpowder, it might be enough.
It might be enough. And they do get gunpowder, which is strictly regulated by the crown.
Yeah, where'd they get gunpowder from?
Well, it's not that hard to make gunpowder.
Oh.
And there's smugglers in an illicit enterprise. Plus, Fawkes has contacts with militaries, and they start reaching out to other people. It's not super hard to get. And plus, they're men of means.
But either way, they're able to gather a large amount of it without anyone knowing that.
Yes, it takes time.
Yes.
So he gets together with the guys, and they're plotting this out over a period of years. It takes about 2 years to get everything going.
Yeah.
Because, and we can totally relate to this, they're going to attack Parliament, and it closes because of the plague.
Oh, no.
They're worried about people getting sick, so they social distance and don't convene Parliament.
Huh.
Well, what this gives them time to do is gather more gunpowder.
Okay.
And what they do, there's a story that they dug a tunnel, but they did not dig a tunnel. There was no tunnel found.
Oh.
There was nothing like that.
What's
they
the
did,
story from?
and it was one of the guys in the band said there was a tunnel,
Yeah.
but he was like tortured. And then they searched for this tunnel where it was supposed to be. There was no tunnel.
Yeah.
And Fawkes said it to kind of throw people off.
Sure.
But there was no tunnel. What they did was they rented a house because Catesby got himself recruited to the Royal Guard. It was these 50 noble warriors that were to protect the king.
Get close.
Get
Good
close.
idea.
Get close. Smart move. So
Mhm.
it gives him an opportunity to move into the city because he's a rural guy. Most nobles are. You own land, you have peasants,
Yeah.
that whole thing. So he moves into the city, sets up his base, and his buddies start kind of moving to different properties and sussing some things out, what they can do. And what they find is there is an old, basically, cellar directly underneath the parliamentary chambers. Now, these are used for storage.
Sure.
And people can just rent them. Like I said, this is a warren. There's merchants there.
Oh, so they're going to rent the
So they just rent this cellar.
storage room beneath the
Parliament.
Right.
They just rent it. That's all they had to do. Like they
What,
said that there was this big tunnel plan. They don't even need a tunnel. They just rent the room directly underneath this building. And then they have
Landlord doesn't ask a lot of questions.
doesn't ask a lot of questions. No.
They don't have to pay extra rent for an animal, like having a cat.
Nope.
You got to pay cat rent.
Nope. Nope. Because cats are good.
You
They
guys,
eat the rats.
you guys planning putting any gunpowder in here?
Nope. Actually, none. These
we
are
do-
barrels of wine.
We'd like the lease to be month to month at most, though, please.
Yeah, we definitely don't want it past November-ish.
Yeah, early
1605.
November.
Not gonna need it. Why? You guys leaving town? Just- So they also get another little house across the river.
That's nice.
And that's where they load their gunpowder,
Yeah.
and then they row it over at night, barrel by barrel.
Oh,
This takes a long period of time. They want to make sure they do it when it's cloudy
sure.
and it's safe, and they got this
Yeah.
whole plan. And they eventually get 36 barrels of gunpowder, which is more than enough to blow up the entire structure.
Yeah. All in this little, they get it all
In
in
this
the cellar?
little cellar.
Okay.
Yeah. I forget that they had a specific term for this kind of cellar, but it's like a foundational.
Yeah.
It looks the equivalent of like a crawl space. This is literally just a structural thing
So whole
to
there.
hold the building up, and they used to store food and firewood and things like that in
Yeah.
all of these little areas because at the time you could have a siege, you could have food shortages, you could have whatever. So you always want to be prepared with raw material.
Sure.
So these guys just, if it's not full, you could just rent out the space. That's extra money.
All right.
So they're renting out this space, they're filling it up,
They got enough in there to do it.
and they've got enough in there to do it. They just need Parliament to convene. Now, during this time period, a couple of the members start to get kind of cold feet. They are concerned about the potential massive loss of life
Yeah.
and how that reflects on them as good Catholics. They're murdering somebody.
Yeah.
They're planning on murdering some people that aren't even involved in this. One of them is like, this is a regicide. We're killing a king. This is a big deal.
That's why premeditated murder is more punished. You had a lot of time to think about it.
Yeah.
Like 2 years to think about killing the king.
And this keeps getting delayed because they're going to kill the king.
Yeah.
They have a plan.
We're
They're
doing
going to
this.
do it. And then Parliament doesn't convene. So they shift their plan to make it even more effective. And then Parliament doesn't convene again because of the plague. So they keep shifting it and they keep trying to perfect it.
How is the government being run in this time?
So at this time, you've got the king. He's the boss of everything.
Yeah.
And then you have Parliament. And Parliament is not elected officials. These are nobles. So you have the House of Lords, the House of Commons.
Yeah.
The House of Lords are just, you're a lord. You own a certain amount of land. You have the title. And you come in and you talk. And you yell at each other.
Yeah.
The way that the modern day House of Lords and House of Commons kind of work is very similar to how it worked back then.
Yeah, okay.
You know, the two sides and people are in different parties and different factions, and they're all vying for things. And the king sits back there like, nah, and then he's got like his speaker there. And they didn't have a prime minister at the time, but they had a bunch of other ministers doing ministerial things. And the king just had kind of a final say-so on things, or he had more power within it, or people wanted to do things, and the king had to ratify everything. It's kind of like our president is the one who signs all the stuff at the end of the day, and the king can just go, nah, fix that. I don't like that.
It's good to be the king.
Yeah, it's good to be the king.
What I was asking was, since they're not meeting in Parliament, how are they running the government as
all locally?
Just saying.
Yep. So the way that the parliamentary system worked then was they passed laws, and then people were just expected to do that stuff. You didn't have to do lots of budgetary stuff because this is, there's no real infrastructure. There's not a lot of the things that we need to spend money on through taxes and other revenues. They don't need it as much. Largely, taxes were used to fund the army, to pay costs for national defense. But like the road system was terrible. This is mud. It's just dirt roads, and dirt roads in England means it's just mud because it's freaking England. It's just raining all the time. It's always wet.
Bad weather.
It's bad weather. So they have some money for that. But really, taxes are all handled locally. You get the lords. They all collect the taxes from the people living in the shires. And England has actually had a system of shires, which is just a chunk of land.
That's where hobbits live.
That's where all the hobbits live. And it's parceled out. And they kind of handle their own stuff internally.
Sure.
They've got their own judges, their own lawyers, and then the lord kind of oversees everything. And it's been like this for 1,000 years. So England has like a rough system of if there's no centralized government, we can still function.
Okay.
And then they kick all the money up to the Royal Treasury, and then the Royal Treasury kind of oversees things. So the king has his own staff that he runs everything with. And then the House of Commons only has to meet if they have business to discuss. They want to change this law needs some tweaking, and otherwise they could handle everything through correspondence with the king directly. I don't like this. This is bad.
So not a lot of reason for them to meet necessarily.
Not a huge. Yeah, if there was a pressing concern, they'd send a letter to the king, or they'd go meet with him personally.
Set up a Zoom call, something.
Right, and that was pretty much how you did things then, because it was a very personal relationship with the ruling class. You went and you talked, and you were buddies, and you went hunting together, and you negotiated, and came up with compromises. That was all. That's what it's supposed to be in government, anyways. It's compromise, trying to work towards a common good. Now, unfortunately for the average person in England, it's for the common good of the nobles.
Well,
but,
our common good.
But for the most part, it wasn't, this super oppressive thing. Although the Catholics would argue completely otherwise.
Yes.
That they are marginalized and murdered. So that was a big part of it, too, was trying to go, oh, well, okay, so you're not as bad as Elizabeth was or Henry was. Can we be even better and maybe just let them worship in open? And it seems like it's...
Could our goal be better and not worse?
Yes, exactly. Can we improve?
Well.
We're here, and that's a livable.
Yeah.
But barely.
We're still just stepping over the bar that's on the ground.
And the amount of money they're making from recusants isn't a huge amount, but it's the equivalent at modern day of billions of dollars every year.
Yeah, but still more of an insult than
it's more. Yeah, it's
a moneymaker.
And they weren't actually hurting. The majority of them were not hurting people, but these extremists make it really, really, really hard for other people to do anything.
You hear that, extremists?
Don't.
You make it hard for everyone.
You make it worse on everybody. And I'm not talking about like a political extremist who's just like really fiery in speeches. I'm talking violence. That's extremism. Like just going out and talking isn't extremism. Unless you're preaching violence, then that's extremism.
Right.
Once you start doing violence, that's not good. And it shoots yourself in the foot.
Doesn't help anybody.
So you've got Catesby, and he's pushing this idea. His friends are, they're Catholics. Some of them are considered good people. Like these aren't like a bunch of nefarious, evil guys taking me in the back. They have even the potentially meanest customer there is Guy Fawkes, the guy who just said, "Yeah, I want to go kill some Protestants, so I'm going to go join." And that's exactly why he did it. He wanted to fight. He thought of himself as like a crusader. But at the end of the day, I'm signing up so I can kill people.
Justify it how you want.
Yeah, you wanted to kill some people because they're different than you.
Yeah.
No matter what, that's that at the end of the day. So some of these guys start talking to priests and confessing.
Oh.
Now at the time, priests, that's a huge thing.
Priests aren't supposed to tell.
They're not supposed to tell.
You're not supposed to.
But they're also talking to like Jesuits.
Oh.
Jesuits are outlawed in England, punishable by death on sight if you're a Jesuit. Because the Jesuits were used by the Spanish. It's a Spanish order of priests, and they were largely used to guide politics in favor of Catholicism. And a lot of them did back revolutionary causes and do some pretty heinous stuff. They started by educating, and then they would push towards rebellion if necessary. And try to have, and their whole goal was to have all of the rulers in Europe, and then eventually the world, answer the Pope.
Oh.
They even tried it in Japan at this same time period. And the Japan culture, they did not tolerate that.
They didn't dig the
Jesuits.
Jesuits.
They were fine with the Jesuits doing whatever they wanted, and they were like, yeah, fine, you can go preach your own thing. And they didn't listen to them. They didn't care. Did not have a lasting impact. Plus, it was really hard to justify like the concept of like Christianity and
it's a big sell
and
starting from nothing.
Yes, with samurai culture of death just happens. You kill yourself too if you do something wrong. That's like you don't do that in Christianity. You can't kill yourself. It's mortal sin. And the samurai are like, no. You messed up. You're supposed to kill yourself. What's wrong with you? So the Jesuits are all over the world at this point in time. They're in Japan. They're in...
they're making things happen.
They're in South America. They're in North America. They're in parts of Africa. They're in Asia. They're all over the place, but they're not supposed to be in England. So the top Jesuit, because of course there's still
Sure,
is talking to these guys, and they're like, so we're going to blow up the king.
What do you think?
What do you think? And he has kind of a crisis. There's letters with him talking to his constituents back in, and some of his friends back in the Vatican going, and the Pope's like, don't do it, please. Signed, the Pope.
The Pope. Please
don't
blow
do
up
it.
the king.
And if the Pope is begging you,
please,
that's a problem.
Yeah.
All right, so we fast forward a little bit. It's beginning of November. They are trying to sort a few things out. And they leave the toughest guy in the group, Guy Fawkes, to watch the gunpowder.
Just watch it.
Just guard it. Because we're going to blow up Parliament. We just have to wait for those buggers to get to Parliament, and we'll kill them all. Yeah. So Fawkes is waiting, and the guards show up. And somebody spilled the beans. An anonymous letter was sent to the king's secretary. And he acted really fast. Because
there's gunpowder under the
there's a problem, right? Yeah. So he's like, nobody go to work today. We got this. So they send guards, and they know everybody in the plot.
Oh, no.
Because these guys were all part of stupid Earl of Essex's plot, or they're friends of his, or the only guy who really wasn't intentionally part of the plot was he was one of their, I think it was Catesby's servant. Oh. He overheard and like, well, you're part of this now.
Oh, I was just listening.
This poor guy gets conscripted to the cause.
Okay.
So Fawkes gets caught. It's an undercroft is what they actually call it. The cellar. He's in this undercroft.
Oh, an undercroft.
And they jump him, and he tries fighting. He's a good swordsman. He's a good soldier. But it's, a dozen guys. So they get him. They capture him. They torture him. Because if you capture, they want to know everything.
Yeah.
They go to catch Catesby. Catesby has found out, oh God, they've caught us. They know that this is happening.
Who's been talking?
We'll leave.
All of you?
But while we leave London, we're going to rally the people.
Aha! A parade.
Which was never part of the plan.
We've gone
They
off
have
script.
made no plans for rallying the people. They tried to talk to Spain and send us 3,000 soldiers. We'll have thousands of Catholics rise up with it. And the Spanish were like, no. This is even at this point, the Spanish are like, no. We tried violence. We're going to try not violence.
This plan is falling
This
apart.
is a terrible idea. So they're literally riding like a Western posse, and they're like trying to do the British are coming thing before it happens. This is the English.
Come on, everyone.
Come on, Catholics. And the Catholics literally just go, no.
Was this on a Sunday? Because we don't do that on Sundays.
We're not fighting on a Sunday. You kid. Practice the Sabbath, you hypocrites. Go to church.
In fact, Friday, Saturday, the whole weekend.
And then half the others like, y'all need Jesus. And they shut the door. So they run and run and run, and it's just like a dozen guys
running around.
And they go to a place called the Holbeck House.
Wait, back up. So when they got Guy Fawkes, did they get the gunpowder out of the...
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, the royals are like, no gunpowder. Get the gunpowder.
They're defused.
They seize it. There's no more bomb. For some reason, Fawkes doesn't think to just blow it up anyway.
Well, he's there.
He's there. I mean, right. But
that's why I wouldn't.
How devoted to the cause are you if you're not going to blow yourself up?
Not that devoted. No, I wouldn't be. I wouldn't do it.
That's a substandard extremist.
Sounds like Will would have, but
I'm just saying, if you're an extremist, you got to go all the way. Otherwise, you're only kind of an extremish. Extremish.
Call yourself
I'm on the way there. But so anyway, so these guys have retreated to this house, and they are going to fight it out. And the sheriff shows up with 200 men.
Oh, and there's 12 of them.
Yeah, there's maybe a dozen guys.
Okay.
And it doesn't go well. There's like a volley of fire and everybody's down.
Oh.
And apparently they...
Do they know who shot first?
The guys in the house allegedly were
Oops.
like, "You'll never take us alive!"
It's funny though, how the guys who got killed were the ones who were apparently shot first.
Yeah. Well, it was probably a escalating. Somebody pointed their gun. You put your guns down. No, there's 200 of us. You put your guns down.
Yeah.
So they shot up this house, which nowadays still exists and is an old folks home.
Really?
Yes, it's a lovely...
Same structure?
Yeah, lovely brick estate house.
Bullet holes?
Probably.
Cool.
Probably big musket holes. Anyway, some of the people there might have been alive then. That's a dig on old people. That's not nice. There's nobody that old.
If you're
400 some odd years old, talk to us. We want your stories.
We assume you're not using the internet.
Yes. Truth. Probably sleep during the day.
Yeah.
Only get up at night.
Sure.
Eat people.
Vampires.
Yep.
What we're saying.
Only ways. So anyway, they get all the guys. Anyone who doesn't die in the fighting, which is several of them.
Yeah.
Because not just because they get killed, like they don't get killed outright. They were wounded and they were denied medical attention because the sheriff's guys just decided to loot the bodies.
Oh, yeah.
They were taking people's boots. They were taking their socks because they were silk stockings. These are gentlemen. They want their stuff. They got stripped naked and left to die. So you didn't just fail.
Yeah, it didn't end well at all.
You're just dead and naked.
Yeah.
So there's a few guys left.
Okay.
It's not all. It wasn't just Fawkes got captured. There were a few who didn't get to join up. So it was maybe. I think it was actually only half the conspirators were caught at this house. Okay. The rest got caught afterwards, but they all got caught except I think 2 of them made it to France, and they just disappeared. But overwhelmingly, they get caught. And on the 8th, I think. Where is it? Oh, no, this was a little bit later. So all the way in January 31st, Guy Fawkes gets brought out in front of everyone where he's hanged until he's half dead.
Ooh.
Drawn, which means they cut you down, and then they cut you open, and they start pulling parts out while you're still alive. And then they quarter you, which is cut you into 4 pieces and cut your head off. So technically fifths.
Yeah.
And they put his head on a spike, and they're like, this is what happens to traitors, because that was the punishment for treason.
Next time we'll kill you.
Unfortunately, what this causes immediately is a crackdown on Catholics. Not a really bad one, though. This was actually kind of surprising. Mm-hmm. So all the conspirators, they're all dead. Anyone who's caught, they die, and they die badly. But all the rest of the Catholics, anyone is... And then the Jesuit, the head of the Jesuit order, he's publicly executed, too. He denies having anything to do with it, but they're like, but they confessed to you. But I couldn't tell you. I'm a priest.
My job.
Treason. You answer to the king.
Yikes.
And he's like, I don't. And they're like, we don't care. Kill them. And technically, the sanctity of the confessional isn't supposed to cover a planned crime.
Right.
So that's kind of nonsense. It's like, if you're planning a mortal sin and planning on doing something really bad, the sanctity of the confessional kind of goes away.
You're not pre-confessing.
It's like, if you confess to something you have done, well, then that's not really anything they can do about it. Yeah. But if you're plotting violence,
should have told somebody.
There's some questions about that. So, and really, frankly, just morally, somebody tells you they're going to kill somebody. Sure. I don't care who you are. tattle on them.
Yeah.
Make sure they
Especially
don't kill anybody.
if it's the king and law
Especially the
parliament.
king and a bunch of innocent people in this warren of buildings. So, there's a crackdown. They kill all these people, and then the king says, "Well, anybody who comes forward and talks to me, I will pardon." And he does.
Whoa, I'm
He
not falling for that.
does. He actually pardons anybody who wasn't directly related. But all these Catholics swarm up and like, I'm a Catholic and I just want to practice my religion.
I don't want to
I
be
had
involved.
nothing to do with this. I just want to live in peace and practice my faith. And he goes, okay,
Wow,
you're fine.
Good
You're
job,
fine.
James.
You guys had nothing to do with it.
what up, guy?
But he still has the fines. And he grows very untrustworthy of the Catholics
Wow,
because
I would too.
they tried to blow him up.
Yeah.
And the best bit is, all the people they had planned to like take over. They had this guy this Lord Percy. They're like, he'll become our like middle guy. He had no idea this was a plan.
Oh, should probably mention
He was
that to
not
him.
associated with. This is for having all these delays and all these plots. They sure knew they were going to blow things up, but like the princess had no idea. Her keepers had no idea. They had no way of getting to her. They had no way of actually enacting anything. So it's this futile gesture of
Yeah.
we're going to blow it up because we can and we've got to kill the king. And it just caused worse problems. So the legacy of this is really complicated because Guy Fawkes has been used as this kind of a rational,
Yeah.
he was fighting the good fight. But he really wasn't. He was a terrorist.
Just a dork.
Today, he'd be considered a terrorist.
Yeah.
And they hadn't exhausted their means of discussion, and things were getting better for Catholics, and their actions made things much harder on them. Now, eventually, you mentioned Oliver Cromwell.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff starts to happen where the Catholics have a resurgence. They take control of England. And they do the same thing to the Protestants, because if you just go around murdering people, it doesn't end well.
Mm-hmm.
And it causes all of this sectarian bloodshed. But eventually you get to the point where the Church of England becomes much more tolerant, much less violent towards its own people. Their monarchy starts to shift and just go, well, we're all English, yeah? Except those dirty peasants in the colonies.
And probably the Jews.
And probably the Jews again, unfortunately. But England starts to get a lot more tolerant as a result of this. But it's very interesting that the immediate result was not they just killed every Catholic. And what is actually really cool is England and Spain reached a political accord after this, where they declared peace.
Oh.
James was like, this has gotten really out of hand. I would like to have it not be so crazy anymore. And James was actually considered a very good king for how he handled all of this. He did a good job. And then there was Jamestown and sent a lot of people over there. And that was very different, totally different conversation. But no, so that's the Gunpowder.
So why should we remember the 5th of November? What was the...
I think, to me, the key story is remember that the extremism is a really dangerous, bad idea.
Yep.
Political discourse is good.
Yep.
Try to talk your problems out.
Don't blow them up.
Don't blow people up. Don't murder people. And, try to keep, because this is very hyperbolic rhetoric. They're talking about like end of the world, end of days stuff, when it was just made a lot worse by them saying and doing all of these extreme things. We're seeing it nowadays where you've got people pushing very different ideas, but rather than trying to come to grips and talk, it gets pushed much more extreme. And it's because, you start getting in your own little world. So yeah.
It's weird how these things connect to everyday life.
Don't plan acts of violence against the government.
There you go.
That's a terrible idea.
Talk to
Especially when
people.
you have elected officials and like a house, they had parliament and they were working on stuff.
We have a system in place.
We have systems in place, and they do in fact work.
Well,
at least nowadays. It's a lot better nowadays.
Sure.
400 years later.
We haven't blown up a parliament in ever. All right, well, that was delightful.
Yeah.
And I feel like I learned the opposite of what I thought I was going to learn today. So good job, Will.
It's an interesting thing. It's an interesting thing because you always got to think, I think the main lesson I took from this was it was not as obvious.
Yeah.
It was not necessarily everybody involved is a good guy or a bad guy. Like Fawkes is an extremist, and Catesby was kind of an extremist, but some of the other guys in the plot were not. They were not monsters. They're not
just guys.
Evil. Fawkes was a diehard, I want to kill all these people. Catesby was a diehard, but the other guys felt like they'd been pushed too far. And even Fawkes, who was this extremist, it was because family members of his had been murdered, and he'd been pushed that far. So I also think, if that hasn't happened to you, maybe temper any kind of extreme thoughts you have about how your sense of oppression nowadays.
Don't take on someone else's oppression onto your own and to become an extremist.
Yeah, that's a terrible idea. It's a terrible idea. So there's a lot of lessons to be learned, and it's never as black and white as you think. We had to go back almost 50 years to learn why some of this was a problem. Nearly 100 years for other things. So you got to look at it from different angles. You have to understand why people get to where they are.
All right.
Are they?
We have we're out of time.
We're out of time. The timer on the clock says we're actually 5 minutes over. A little over.
I have to look up a couple things about the jazz mandolin and Germany after Hitler. I'll look at it myself. But next week we'll be here on November 11th, same time. Although we do have the daylight savings time this week, so it'll be same time, but slightly darker.
It'll be darker. Different light.
Yeah. And next week we're discussing what?
We are going to talk about Hernan Cortez meeting Montezuma in 1519.
We're jumping to another continent.
We're going to a different continent, but we're still kind of floating around the same time period.
Interesting.
Very different, though, and we're going to figure out why does that matter? What does it mean? Some of you who know a little bit about American history might go, Hernando Cortez. Is that the guy from Pirates of the Caribbean? That's the gold they were looking for. We're not going to talk about the gold.
Cortez meeting Montezuma.
Cortez meeting Montezuma, and I think that was November 8th? No, because that's this week.
Right. I wrote down November 11th, but
November 11th.
That's what our show is.
We're having the show. Yeah. I think it was maybe the 9th.
So thank you once again for all those watching. We'll read through the comments later and respond to those next week.
That's right.
And we will see you all next week. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.